After Suya confirmed, Isuzu admitted that she was asking him out on a date. However, Suya still couldn't fathom why he was being coerced. He mentioned that Isuzu did it to prevent him from escaping. Surprisingly, the bullets used in her rifle were real. Reluctantly, Suya ultimately had to comply with Isuzu's wishes. On Sunday, they had agreed to meet at Amaji Station. Suya arrived early and waited for Isuzu. For some reason, Suya repeatedly struck poses in front of the mirrors at the location. It appeared that Suya was quite confident in his good looks. With his cool appearance and impressive school achievements, he understood why Isuzu, a transfer student he didn't know well, had asked him out. Suddenly, Suya was startled when Isuzu emerged from the building where she had been reading a magazine without notifying him that she had arrived. While waiting for the bus, Suya asked where they were going. It turned out that Isuzu was taking him to Amaburi, or Amaji Brilliant Park. Upon hearing this, Suya immediately wanted to go home. However, Isuzu prevented him by pointing her gun at him, just like at school. Suya truly couldn't understand why he was being taken to such a rundown amusement park. Despite Suya's complaints and grumbling, he eventually boarded the bus as well. During the journey, Isuzu asked if Suya had ever been to Amaburi before. Suya couldn't quite remember, but it seemed he had been there once as a child. Shortly after that, Suya saw a magnificent fortress on the right side of the road. The bus announced that the next stop was Amaji Brilliant Park. Naturally, Suya prepared to disembark upon hearing this. However, for some reason, Isuzu stopped him. She said they would only get off at the next stop. Isuzu explained that the fortress earlier was the entrance to the Le Hotel. People often get confused. Originally, the entrance gate to Amaji Brilliant Park was indeed there. However, the park was relocated about 10 years ago during renovations, and the fortress was built near the bus stop. Suya wondered why the bus stop wasn't changed. It turned out that the request had been made before but was ignored for various reasons. There were usually many guests arriving at the wrong bus stop. Suya was puzzled about who Isuzu meant by guests. She explained that in almost all amusement parks, visitors are called guests, and the employees are called servants. Finally, they reached their destination. Just at the entrance gate, the appearance was already unpleasant. The place was very old, and the fountain had run dry. Many facilities were in a state of disrepair. Moreover, the park was incredibly deserted, even though it was a Sunday. Suddenly, Isuzu informed Suya of the fact that this park used to be visited by 2,110 guests per day during the holiday season. Then first of all, Isuzu wanted to take Suya to the Witch's Hill. Witch's Hill was a dreamlike fairy tale area that served as the mascot of the Magic Kingdom of Maple Land. There, they visited one of the attractions called the Tirami Flower Adventure. Isuzu mentioned that Tirami was a flower fairy. In this attraction, they would ride a heart-cleansing train to a world full of joy. However, judging by its appearance, Suya wasn't sure about it. Inside the attraction, the staff seemed unenthusiastic in serving them. Then, as the train started moving, they almost fell because there was a broken track. The flowers and robots they passed while riding the train were also no longer maintained. And Tirami, who should have been waving his hands on the stage they passed, was nowhere to be seen today. Hearing Isuzu's words, Suya became curious about how many times he had been here. Next, Isuzu took him to the Macaron Music Theater. Macaron was a music fairy. However, at the entrance, there was a sign saying that Macaron was on holiday today. Isuzu already knew that Macaron always closed whenever he felt unenthusiastic. Finally, they continued to the Moffle Candy House. Moffle was a candy fairy and also the flagship mascot of Amaburi. After entering, Suya found out that this was a shooting attraction. More precisely, he had to shoot toy mice in the kitchen with a pistol. Suya felt confident in his abilities, but it turned out that he had quite a hard time playing it. He could only kill 13 mice out of the 100 target. Suya was surprised that they used the word killed in a children's game like this. Afterward, they could take a photo with Moffle as a keepsake. Shortly after, they saw a mascot coming out of the door. Isuzu informed them that it was Moffle. And for some reason, instead of taking a photo together, Moffle was the one taking pictures of Isuzu and Suya. Suya also got annoyed because of Moffle's irritating attitude. He wanted to get out of this situation quickly. Suddenly, Moffle threw the camera right at Suya's head. Isuzu said that Moffle didn't like being called irritating. Then, Maful also hit Saya, and they got into an argument. Fortunately, Isuzu stopped them with the two rifles in her hands. Strangely, Saya wasn't injured at all. After all those experiences, Isuzu asked about Saya's experience with Maful. She wanted Saya to befriend Maful. Saya, of course, refused, and surprisingly, Maful also said he didn't want to. Saya didn't know that Maful could speak. Outside, Saya was still complaining about Maful's behavior earlier. He was convinced that someone behind the costume was a villain. However, Isuzu denied it. It wasn't about a villain, she said there was no one inside. Maful came from the magical kingdom. Saya just thought that Isuzu didn't want to disappoint children by saying that. After that, they went to Elementario. There were 4 fairies there. First, there was Salama, the fire fairy, who was the laziest among them. Then there was Koboli, the earth fairy, who appeared quiet. Next was Sylphie, the wind fairy, whose personality seemed outgoing. Finally, there was Muse, the water fairy, who was very enthusiastic. Isuzu and Saya only stopped by and went to the next place, the roller coaster Thrill. However, when Saya rode it, he didn't feel tense or thrilled at all. Next, they went to the souvenir shop, Brilliant Market. This place should have sold the latest Amaberry merchandise, but what was in front of them now was only old items. They then went to the Rabbit Park, which only had elderly people spending time there. There was also a free fall attraction that was too slow to be called an attraction. On the contrary, there was a coffee cup ride with a rotation speed that was too fast. After visiting all these places, Saya protested because Isuzu had taken him to this rundown amusement park. However, Isuzu realized that Saya was angry not because he was forced to date in this place, but solely because of this amusement park. Suddenly, Isuzu took out her notebook and read its contents. She had data about Kanyi Saya, attending Amaji High School Class 2 to 4, 16 years old. Living with his older sister, handsome, smart, and good at sports. Talented and capable of doing anything well, but he was very narcissistic and liked to check himself in public places. That's why he still didn't have any friends or a girlfriend. During lunch, he always ate alone. Isuzu stated that she had thoroughly researched him. She even knew about Kodama Saya, the stage name Saya used when he was a child actor. But Kodama Saya suddenly stopped 5 years ago. Based on the available data, he should be a high school student now. Isuzu wanted to know what Kodama Saya thought about the current condition of the park. Saya only understood that Isuzu had deliberately brought him here because she knew about his past. Nevertheless, Saya remained indifferent and wanted to go home. Before that, Isuzu cooked some croquettes for him to eat first. Initially, Saya had no expectations. However, he didn't expect the croquettes to be so delicious that he even ate 3 of them. Isuzu informed him that the croquettes were made here. Before leaving, Isuzu wanted Saya to meet the maker of the croquettes. Next, they went to a large fortress within the amusement park. Isuzu said they would go to the roof of the fortress to meet the park's manager. On the way, Saya also found out that Isuzu was an Amaberry employee. Once on the rooftop, Saya saw a little girl with blonde hair like a fairy tale princess. The girl introduced herself as Latifa Floranza. Saya wanted to know what Latifa wanted from him and was curious how a young girl seemed to be the manager of the park. Latifa already knew that the park was on the brink of ruin. That's why she asked Saya to restore the park to its former glory. There was a prophecy that said Saya could save the park. Most of the employees in the park were residents of the magical kingdom of Maple Land. They came from the world of the magic kingdom to the human world. However, if they couldn't bring in 250,000 guests in the next 3 months, the park would be closed. If that happened, the residents of Maple Land would lose their home. Latifa knew her words were hard to believe. Therefore, Latifa wanted to prove it by giving Saya magical power. Saya didn't expect Latifa to kiss him on the lips. For some reason, Saya fainted after the kiss. Upon regaining consciousness, Saya was already in his room. He thought everything that happened at Amaberry was just a dream. However, when he entered the bathroom, he saw Isuzu changing her clothes. Saya immediately knocked on his sister Asu's room to ask what was going on. Asu explained that Isuzu had brought Saya home after he fainted. Since it was already too late, Asu allowed him to stay here. At that moment, for some reason, Saya could hear his sister saying something even though her mouth didn't move. Asu was very surprised when Saya mentioned the words he had just heard. When he came out of the bathroom, Isuzu informed him that it was the magical power given by Latifah. Continuing on to episode 2, Seiya attempted to reaffirm his powers by reading people's minds at the station. In doing so, Isuzu hoped that Seiya could believe her story. The nobles of Maple Land could bestow magic upon commoners through kisses. Seiya just learned that the manager he met yesterday was a noble. Suddenly, Isuzu asked Seiya to use his magic to read her mind. In her heart, Isuzu informed him that there was a record of someone who had the same magic in the past. However, that person could only use it once on someone. Seiya realized that he wouldn't be able to use his powers on Isuzu again. He was trapped. What was clear was that Seiya was given that power in order to manage Amaburi. After school, Isuzu invited Seiya to the park again. If he refused, Isuzu would threaten him with her gun once more. Meanwhile, at Amaburi, Moffel was visiting Latifah in her castle. For some reason, Latifah referred to Moffel as Uncle. Moffel wanted to inquire about Seiya, who had come yesterday. Latifah had already met him, but Seiya had fainted during the magic power bestowing ritual. Latifah felt that the current situation would change if Seiya joined them. Near the entrance gate, 2 young visitors were playing with 2 mascots there, Macaron and Tirami. However, the way the children played with them involved hitting the 2 mascots. Afterward, Macaron and Tirami immediately looked for massage chairs to relax their bodies. Tirami was really annoyed with the kids earlier. However, according to Macaron, they had to be patient to survive in the entertainment world. Then, Moffel approached them with a gloomy face. He said he still couldn't accept the kid Isuzu had brought yesterday. After that, the 4 fairies also arrived to greet them. The 4 of them continued to behave as usual. Now Seiya and Isuzu were on a bus for their journey to Amaburi. Seiya still had many questions in his mind. First of all, he wanted to know what Maple Land really was. Isuzu answered that Maple Land was a magical kingdom located between the mainland and the sea. Latifah was its first princess. Seiya recalled the strange words from Latifah about her people losing their purpose in life. Isuzu confirmed that what was meant was likely animus. Animus was the crystallization of the joy of the guests who came to the park. It served as their energy to survive. Amaburi was a facility for collecting animus. More precisely, they referred to the facility as Ardul. In other words, the life or death of the park was synonymous with the life or death of Maple Land's people. Isuzu mentioned that Urayasu Digimland and Highland Fujimi were also Ardul. There were other magical kingdoms in this world, and they each built their own Ardul. Without animus, the magical kingdoms would lose their power. If they lost their power, their existence would also disappear. Upon reaching the entrance gate, Isuzu was greeted by a gatekeeper wearing a peculiar mask. It turned out that this person was a regular human, not a citizen of Maple Land. Not only him, Isuzu explained that there were many regular humans working here. By the way, they entered Amaburi through the employee dormitory. Isuzu also lived in that dormitory. Today, Isuzu wanted Seiya to come to the administrative office. As soon as they entered the office, Seiya immediately got into an argument with Moffel again. Isuzu asked him to hurry up. Soon, he would meet their enemy. In the office, Seiya and Isuzu met a group of people in a meeting room. They were from the Image Development Group. One of them was named Kurisu Takaya. Isuzu made up a story that Seiya was an intern here. She also explained that Latifah, the manager, couldn't attend due to feeling unwell. Isuzu would be temporarily taking Latifah's position. During the meeting, Takaya once again reminded them of their agreement regarding the annual visitor count, which was calculated every early August. The rights to the park would be handed over to the Image Development Group if they couldn't reach 500,000 visitors within 5 years. In the past 4 years, only 250,000 visitors were recorded. Currently, it was the first week of May, which meant that Amaburi had less than 3 months left. Because of that, Takaya wondered why the park wasn't in better shape, even though it's about to close. Isuzu replied that they still believed they could reach 500,000 visitors. Takaya found that impossible. For example, if a family of 4 visited Amaburi, based on last year's visitor count, in order for the park not to close, that family would have to spend a lot of money in one day at the park. Takaya was still calculating it with a calculator. Meanwhile, Seiya could immediately guess the amount, which was 85,000 yen. Takaya was surprised because his answer was almost correct. The correct amount was 83,200 yen. Even though it seemed impossible, Takaya hoped for 250,000 Nave visitors to come to the park. After the meeting, Isuzu asked how Seiya could guess the number earlier. It turned out that Seiya relied on quick calculations based on yesterday's visitors and the park's size. He said it was a mental game called Fermi estimation. Setting that aside, Seiya was curious about why Isuzu introduced him to the Image Development Group. Isuzu wanted to introduce Seiya to her future adversary as a manager. Seiya couldn't understand why Isuzu still thought he would agree to become the manager. His free time had been taken away, he was threatened with a gun, but Isuzu still dared to ask for his help shamelessly. Isuzu actually felt guilty about it too. However, she still wasn't accustomed to this world. She didn't know how to ask for help from humans on Earth. Even so, Seiya wondered why they didn't just seek help from a management consultant. It turns out they had tried that, but everything fell through. Seiya still didn't care and just wanted to go home. Despite her efforts, Isuzu couldn't persuade him. At the bus stop just outside Amaburi, Seiya encountered Takaya once again. Suddenly, Takaya grew suspicious of Seiya and approached him. Upon closer inspection, Takaya seemed to realize that Seiya was Kodama Seiya. He didn't expect a big celebrity like him to intern at this rundown park. Takaya warned him not to associate with the losers in this place. Afterward, he left in his chauffeured car. Seiya then returned to the bench to wait for the bus. He noticed that the edges of the bench were made dull to prevent children from getting hurt. Additionally, the backrest of the bench was decorated with cute drawings to attract attention. It reminded Seiya of Latifah's delicious croquettes. According to Seiya, the park prioritized the wrong things. Instead of focusing on benches or croquettes, they should pay more attention to the park's appearance first. When the bus arrived, Seiya decided not to board it and instead returned to the park. He went straight to the castle where Latifah was located. On the castle roof, the citizens of Maple Land were gathering. They had a premonition that Princess Latifah would announce bad news. Shortly after that, Isuzu went to the balcony to inform them of Princess Latifah's arrival. As they suspected, Latifah had bad news to deliver. Image Brilliant Park would be closed in 3 months. However, Latifah promised to try to find the new jobs. Suddenly, a pessimistic crocodile mascot interrupted Latifah's idea. The popularity of that mascot was almost at zero, making it difficult to find a new job. People would soon forget it, and it would disappear. Moffle approached the crocodile mascot to console it, but it didn't appreciate Moffle's efforts. It invited Moffle, who was a prominent mascot, making it easy for him to move to another park. Both of them were offended, leading to an argument. Fortunately, Macaron reminded them not to fight in front of Princess Latifah. Princess Latifah was the one most hurt right now. After explaining, Princess Latifah apologized for her inability. After merely observing all this time, Seiya finally made his presence known. He stated that it was too early for apologies. They all must have been surprised by Seiya's appearance. Afterward, Seiya began to berate the incompetence of the citizens of Maple Land in managing the park. Seiya even remembered that the Image Development Group had said that only fools would come to this place, and Seiya felt that it was true. The citizens of Maple Land seemed very angry at Seiya's words. However, Latifah asked him to also come up to the balcony. Upon ascending, Seiya introduced himself. He already knew that they probably hated him. Seiya didn't care even if he was disliked. This was how he would manage the park. However, anyone who didn't follow him would be fired. Nevertheless, Seiya declared that the kid they hated would work miracles in 3 months. On that evening, Seiya informed Latifah and Isuzu that his earlier remarks were just an act. He deliberately made them angry. When Seiya called the park visitors foolish, everyone was genuinely furious. This meant that they were still taking their job seriously. Seiya emphasized that he would only help for 3 months. After that, he would leave. Nevertheless, Seiya warned them to prepare for the worst-case scenario. His speech about miracles was also just for show. If they wanted the citizens to put in effort, it was better for them to believe in hope. Afterward, Seiya went to the administrative office and requested the necessary documents from Isuzu. Meanwhile, Moffle was currently at a bar. He ordered beer and cold tomatoes as if he were a regular customer. Then, Moffle entered a private room where Macaron and Tirami were already present. Apparently, their mascot-shaped bodies could be disguised using an amulet. With the amulet, no one would realize their true identities. Moffel was still annoyed with Seiya. However, Macaron and Tirami advised him to see how Seiya performed first. The next morning, there was an announcement posted at the entrance gate. It stated that the park was closed because all employees had to clean the park. Moffel became even more frustrated because he didn't understand Seiya's intentions. Moving on to episode 3, Seiya was getting ready for his first day as the manager. He was wearing the Amaberry staff uniform, which made him even more narcissistic as he gazed at himself in the mirror. As announced earlier that morning, Amaberry was closed for the day for cleaning. Seiya and Isuzu went around to supervise the cleaning of all the areas. When Seiya arrived at Moffel's candy house, Moffel himself suddenly charged at Seiya, not accepting that the park was closed. As long as the park had been standing, they had never closed it without prior notice. As usual, the two of them engaged in a fistfight. They had fought so often that Seiya could now read Moffel's attack patterns. Eventually, Isuzu stopped them with her gun, asking them to calm down. Nevertheless, Moffel couldn't let the visitors outside, who had already planned to enter the park, down. So Seiya asked Moffel to entertain the spectators outside. Initially, Moffel lacked confidence because there were no facilities outside to support him. However, after being provoked by Seiya, Moffel hurried to do it. Upon inspection, Moffel's candy house appeared to be well maintained. It seemed that Moffel was quite serious about his job. Afterward, Seiya held a meeting with all the department heads. Seiya wanted to discuss 3 main things in this meeting. Firstly, he wanted to extend the park's opening hours. They all disagreed unanimously. The head of the mechanical department wanted to know how long the extension would be. The problem was that the park lacked facilities to accommodate visitors at night. Seiya replied that they would extend the closing time from 5 o'clock p.m. to 7 o'clock p.m. At the same time, they would install adequate lighting. After the installation was complete, the park would be closed at 9 o'clock p.m. The second topic Seiya wanted to discuss was the elimination of the weekly day off on Fridays. Once again, they all rejected the idea. Seiya himself didn't understand why they had a day off on Fridays. It turned out they did it because Friday was their last working day. Seiya then decided that from tomorrow until July 31st, the park would not have a single day off. The others eventually agreed. The third topic was that until July 31st, Seiya wanted the park to offer free admission in all facilities to visitors. Of course, the others were shocked to hear this. The head of the finance department strongly opposed this idea. Moffel also disagreed. They were professional workers and couldn't provide performances for free. Otherwise, visitors might not be willing to pay after being continuously given free access. Seiya understood if this plan was rejected. Therefore, he had another idea. All prices in the park would be lowered to 30 yen. Since the park would celebrate its 30th anniversary next year, he suggested a price of 30 yen. Ashi still disagreed because 30 yen was almost the same as free. However, Seiya emphasized that the number of visitors was more important than profits for now. After presenting these 3 topics, the meeting concluded. On their way to the main gate, Moffel complained about what had happened to Macaron. Macaron himself wasn't too upset. He also agreed that the park would end if it didn't attract enough visitors. Afterward, the two of them prepared to entertain the spectators outside. As soon as they stepped out, Moffel was immediately attacked by a child. The child's mother tried to stop it, not out of pity for the mascot, but out of concern that her child might catch a disease from the dirty costume. Moffel became even more upset when he was mocked like that. Meanwhile, Salama eagerly recorded the incident. Trying to remain patient, Moffel only pushed the mother. The child and mother then complained to a man about Moffel. The man indeed looked like a troublemaker. He wanted to beat Moffel for his actions. Macaron tried to stop them, but it was already too late. Moffel easily avoided the man's attack and retaliated with a single punch. The man immediately fainted. Not satisfied with just that, Moffel also wanted to beat the mother and child. Fortunately, Seiya arrived to stop him. After that, the 3 of them were taken to the administrative office. Isuzu shot them with memory-erasing bullets to make them forget what had happened earlier. Seiya felt like a villain for shooting visitors. He also couldn't understand why Moffel started the trouble. According to Isuzu and Macaron, Moffel usually had a short temper. At least an incident like this happened once a year. Moffel felt guilty and offered to resign. However, Seiya couldn't fire him because Moffel was an important mascot. Therefore, Seiya forgave him this time. If something similar happened again, Seiya would fire him immediately. In his office, Seiya thanked Isuzu for erasing the family's memories. However, Isuzu reminded him that memory-erasing bullets were very precious. It took a year to make one bullet, so Seiya couldn't rely on them all the time. Nevertheless, Seiya was still grateful. Hearing this, Seiya had an idea since Isuzu was willing to do anything. Unexpectedly, Seiya instructed Isuzu and the other girls to wear bikinis to create a promotional video. Seiya was assisted by Toriken, a Triceratops mascot who served as the head of the marketing department, in recording the video. The girls would strike poses while holding pom-poms, and then announce that Amabiri's entrance tickets were now priced at 30 yen. After finishing the recording, Toriken and Seiya were editing the footage for uploading. Toriken was somewhat surprised that Moffel allowed Seiya to film Latifah. Seiya didn't understand Toriken's concern. Suddenly, Moffel stormed into Seiya's office in anger. He couldn't accept the provocative advertising method. As usual, they engaged in a fistfight that was eventually stopped by Isuzu. Moffel informed them that Latifah's body was very fragile. However, Seiya remembered that Latifah could decline if she didn't want to participate. According to Moffel, Latifah was a good girl, so she wouldn't want to refuse Seiya's request. Nonetheless, Isuzu was confident that Latifah had considered Seiya's request and would be sad if they argued because of it. Moffel finally calmed down but requested that Latifah not be taken outside the palace anymore. That place was her sanctuary. Seiya still didn't fully understand what they were talking about. Moffel stated that he didn't want to bother explaining to someone who would be leaving in the next 3 months. Isuzu then explained that it wasn't good for Princess Latifah to leave the protected barrier built around the palace. Seiya couldn't fathom why Isuzu hadn't informed him of such an important matter sooner. Isuzu replied that it didn't need to be widely known because it wasn't directly related to the park's operation. After all the recent events, Seiya still asked Toriken to upload the advertisement. He also requested Toriken to edit another video. The next day, the advertisement uploaded on the movie only garnered 218 viewers. Then in the evening, Seiya inquired about the number of guests who had visited that day. The count was 198, more than usual. For some reason, Seiya didn't seem too pleased about it. The following day, the advertisement video suddenly reached 8,873 viewers. Back at the office, Isuzu informed them of an unexpected development regarding their ad. Out of nowhere, Moffel came into their workspace with a cheerful expression. Proudly, Moffel showed a video of himself fighting with rowdy visitors from the other day. Moffel became even more arrogant because the comment section supported him, and he even taunted Seiya's bikini advertisement, which had fewer viewers. Moffel's fight video had indeed garnered 203,425 views. It seemed like Seiya's video was being watched because it was related to Moffel's video. However, for some reason, Seiya just laughed heavily. He then instructed Moffel to check the uploader's name on the fight video. It turned out the uploader's name was Ayes, which, when reversed, spelled Sdiya. Instantly, Toriken came to explain. The video was recorded by Salama and edited by Toriken together with Seiya. Without their edits, Moffel would have looked like the villain in the video. Now it was Seiya's turn to boast. He easily turned bad news into something that could attract visitors. Nevertheless, the number of viewers for his bikini advertisement was not very high. Seiya also didn't know if this would bring visitors to the park. The likelihood was that only 1% of the viewers would actually come here. However, the video could still attract visitors. It was better to have 1,001 visitors than 1,000. Seiya was determined to bring in visitors. Afterward, Moffel still appeared to be entertaining visitors in the park. Seiya and Isuzu went to meet Okuro, the masked gatekeeper, to inquire about the day's visitor progress. It had slightly increased with 223 visitors. Okuro also noticed that Moffel seemed more enthusiastic today, and the children really liked him. For some reason, Isuzu appeared to be deep in thought. When the night came they finished work, Isuzu went to the bar where Moffel usually hung out. She went there because she was invited to a morale-boosting party sponsored by Moffel. However, only Isuzu, Macaron, Tirami, and Moffel himself showed up. Moffel had invited everyone, but they didn't come. Isuzu felt awkward because the others were drinking beer. Suddenly, Tirami mentioned that the others probably didn't want to come because Moffel was a siskin, someone with an excessive affection for their sibling. Rumor had it that Moffel doted on Latifah because she resembled his sister. He immediately attacked Macaron and Tirami. Moffel stated that it was only natural to be concerned about his niece. The three of them engaged in a fistfight, which was later stopped by Isuzu's gun. Moffel realized that Isuzu had been looking down the whole time. He asked if something had happened to Saya. Macaron and Tirami immediately pried into the gossip, even mentioning a rumor about Isuzu staying at Saya's house. Once again, Isuzu shot the three of them with her gun. At that moment, Wanipi, the crocodile mascot, arrived with news about Princess Latifah. Moving on to episode 4, Sia and Isuzu immediately paid a visit to Latifah upon hearing the news that she had fainted. When they arrived, Latifah had already regained consciousness. She didn't want to worry anyone and explained that she had just felt a bit dizzy before fainting. While riding the elevator with Isuzu and Moffel, Saya felt guilty for asking her to come out and revealing a tire, but Moffel disagreed, thinking that wasn't the cause. Nevertheless, such incidents seemed likely to continue. After that, Sia and Isuzu were monitoring Moffel, Macaron, and Tirami as they entertained the children. Saya was pleased to see the three of them motivated, and the number of visitors had increased thanks to a 30-yen promotion. Suddenly, they heard a rumbling noise in the distance, which turned out to be the sound of preschool children on a school trip to Amaburi. Moffel, Macaron, and Tirami were struggling to handle all the preschoolers, especially the mischievous ones. Saya then invited Isuzu to help them, but for some reason, Isuzu seemed hesitant. This made Saya curious, wondering if Isuzu didn't know how to entertain the visitors. Isuzu quickly denied it, stating that she was confident in entertaining the visitors. As Isuzu approached them, she was immediately swarmed by the unruly preschoolers and ended up overwhelmed. Following this, Isuzu and Saya still had many things to oversee. Firstly, they needed to visit the marketing department to discuss the new guide map. They met with Toriken to discuss the matter. Toriken had already created 5 map designs, but all of them were rejected by Saya. Saya showed them how to create a map for the amusement park by adding more vibrant fonts and incorporating the 3 most famous Amaburi mascots. With these changes, the map design looked distinct and more appealing. Once the teaching was done, Sia and Isuzu had to rush to their next destination. They went to the food department led by Niku. Food supplies in the warehouse were running low, and at this rate, they would run out of ingredients by next week. Their current food supplier couldn't accept additional orders. Isuzu suggested finding a new supplier, but without listening to her, Sia already knew what to do. He immediately called the previous supplier who had offered them their services before. Next, they met with Ashi from the finance department. Ashi reported that there were some unnecessary expenses in the recent item list. Isuzu clarified that it referred to the corrected item list. Saya quickly glanced at the document Isuzu was holding and immediately identified the items that weren't needed according to Ash. When Ashi confirmed it, Sia asserted that all the items were necessary and Ash could proceed as planned. Afterwards, they met with Wrench from the mechanical department. She complained about a pump that was on the verge of breaking down. Isuzu suggested contacting the manufacturer, but Sia stated that they had enough money. He instructed Wrench to shut down the nearly broken pump and rely on the remaining 2 pumps. Isuzu felt that this could be dangerous in case of an emergency, but Saya simply said they would deal with it if it happened. Next, they received a complaint about the lack of storage space for souvenirs. Saya promptly provided the necessary permits to allow them to use an empty room for storage. Then, they received a complaint from Okuro about a malfunctioning security camera monitor. Surprisingly, Saya was able to fix it by simply hitting it. After all the supervision, Saya finally returned to his office. This time, he had to review documents and attend a meeting to discuss improving the quality of the performances. The meeting would be attended by Moffel, Macaron, and Tirami. Upon learning this, Sia delegated the meeting to Isuzu. He felt tired and had no energy left to argue with the 3 of them. Before Isuzu left, Sia asked her to handle the task delicately, without forcing it. For some reason, Isuzu's face turned sour when he said that. Shortly after, 4 fairies from Elementario came to Sia's office. They wanted to discuss a somewhat complicated issue. If it was indeed complicated, Sia told them to talk to Isuzu because he was currently busy. However, they said they couldn't discuss this matter in front of Isuzu. They were unsure where to begin. Kobali then suggested that Sia see it for himself in person. Feeling resigned, Sia agreed to accompany them. Saya and the 4 fairies were observing Isuzu. She was currently listening to Moffel's complaint about his nearly broken toy gun. Moffel asked Isuzu to approve the purchase of a new one. However, Isuzu immediately declined due to the current budget constraints. Moffel remained adamant, stating that the audience would be disappointed if his gun remained in this condition. Isuzu continued to refuse and even threatened Moffel with her own gun. Saya couldn't believe such an incident was happening. After that, Isuzu went to see Makaron, who complained about his accordion being damaged. Makaron wanted to buy a new musical instrument. Like before, Isuzu refused and instructed him to use another musical instrument. Once again, Isuzu threatened Moffel with her gun. Next, she met with Tirami. Initially, Tirami mistakenly pulled out an inappropriate object, which prompted Isuzu to shoot him without hesitation. It turned out that Tirami was complaining about his broken flower robot. Again, Isuzu declined his request while brandishing her weapon. Suddenly, Isuzu approached Saya and the four fairies who were secretly observing her. Saya didn't want to involve the four fairies, so he invited Isuzu to have a one-on-one conversation. Saya reminded her that she needed to handle it delicately, to try to communicate with them instead of trying to dominate them. Isuzu mentioned that Saya sometimes tried to dominate as well. Saya admitted to it, but he managed to win their hearts. At present, Isuzu was Saya's secretary, and he couldn't let her bear the burden like this. Isuzu was not happy about being seen as a burden. If that was the case, she didn't know what she should do to improve it. Saya felt somewhat guilty when he saw Isuzu's expression. Then, Isuzu left without saying anything. The next day, Saya visited Latifa again. When he entered her room, he didn't expect that Latifa was in the midst of changing her clothes. Latifa thought that Isuzu had entered the room. After finishing changing, Latifa apologized. Saya had come to check on Latifa's condition. Fortunately, she was feeling better and wanted to go outside for some fresh air. Coincidentally, Latifa wanted to take Saya somewhere. She took him to ride the Ferris wheel together. Latifa had wanted to ride it with Saya for a long time. For some reason, Saya had been feeling tense and uneasy since earlier. Latifa became worried about his behavior and suspected whether he was afraid of heights. When asked, Saya immediately denied it. However, when the Ferris wheel they were on swayed slightly, Saya felt weak with fear. Finally, he admitted that he was indeed afraid of heights. Latifa tried to calm him down by stroking his head. Saya asked Latifa to keep this a secret. Latifa agreed but thought Isuzu should know as well. Ironically, Saya didn't want Isuzu to find out. Suddenly, Saya recalled a vague memory showing Latifa's face. He asked if they had met before. However, Latifa replied that she didn't remember. The next day, heavy rain poured down. Saya was currently at school. He was consistently ignored by Isuzu whenever they crossed paths. Even during the journey to Amaburi, they kept their distance from each other. While at the park, Wrench suddenly ran in a panic to ask for help. There was a malfunctioning pump that could cause problems in this heavy rain. It could potentially flood the underground facilities. Saya wondered why the pump had to stop at this moment. Wrench had already reported that the pump was nearly broken, but she had only told him to rely on the remaining two pumps. Saya thought hard about what to do but panicked and couldn't make a decision. Suddenly, Isuzu, who had just arrived after changing her uniform, offered a solution. They would establish a command center to instruct others to remove the water. Isuzu then communicated via phone from the meeting room. She ordered the placement of firefighting pumps in critical locations. Before the pumps arrived, they had to remove the water with buckets. At the same time, Isuzu instructed them to place sandbags to prevent more water from coming in. When the pumps were in place, they immediately started pumping out the water. After commanding so many locations over the phone, the rain subsided and the previously stopped pump started running again. Wrench, the head of the mechanical department, was highly impressed by Isuzu's performance. Saya also smiled proudly as he watched Isuzu. Saya and Isuzu were now in the underground room to assess the situation. Suddenly, Isuzu stated that she actually had no issue with Saya. Instead, she felt that the problem lay with herself. Before Saya came here, Isuzu was the manager of this park. She was just a soldier who could only command her subordinates. Isuzu revealed that she was a royal soldier and born into a military family. She was accustomed to following orders without question, even though she came here because she was ordered to restore the park's former glory. From the beginning, Isuzu knew she was not suited for this mission. Despite that, she wanted to fulfill their expectations. Unfortunately, she had failed in her mission and didn't know how to face that reality. She stated that all the employees hated her. Saya then revealed that he had also failed. Unexpectedly, Saya confessed that he was afraid of heights. When he was at the peak of his fame as a child actor, he suddenly developed a fear of heights. Like Isuzu, Saya didn't want to disappoint his family and others. In reality, that wasn't the main cause, but the point was that such things were normal in life. After that, they left the underground room. Above ground, Isuzu was greeted by all the employees who thanked her for her hard work. From this scene, Saya reassured Isuzu that she was not hated by the employees. Asuzu was on the verge of tears upon hearing this. Suddenly, she changed the subject by discussing Saya's story of riding the Ferris wheel with Latifa. Asuzu then asked if Saya was not afraid. Saya just blushed and didn't want to answer. At the end of the episode, a creature descended from the sky towards the area around Amaburi. The creature had sharp teeth and fierce eyes like a dragon.